The boxing coach asked the black janitor to fight with her for fun. What happened next left the entire boxing gym speechless. "Hey you there, cleaning lady. How about a quick demonstration?" shouted Coach Diana Thompson from the center of the boxing ring, her championship belt gleaming under the gym's bright overhead lights. "I bet you've never seen a real fight in your entire life. Am I right?" Jessica Washington paused her mopping and slowly raised her head. At 42, she had been working as a night janitor at Thompson's elite boxing gym for merely 3 weeks, always arriving after closing when the fighters and trainers had departed. But on this particular Thursday evening, the advanced training session had extended well beyond the usual schedule. "I don't want to interrupt your training, coach," Jessica responded calmly, returning her attention to scrubbing a persistent stain on the polished floor. "Just finishing up my duties so you can continue your session." Diana released a loud, theatrical laugh that reverberated throughout the spacious gym. "Everyone, look at this spectacle. The woman's too frightened to even step into the ring." The 10 boxing students present exchanged uncomfortable glances, some clearly disturbed by the unfolding situation. What Diana couldn't possibly know was that Jessica had spent the previous 18 years desperately trying to completely erase who she truly was. 18 years since she abandoned the professional boxing circuit after a devastating accident that forever altered her existence. 18 years concealing a secret that not even her teenage daughter knew about. "Come on, lady," Diana continued, approaching with that arrogant smirk she typically used to intimidate newcomers. "Just a simple demonstration. I guarantee you don't even understand basic defensive positioning. How about showing my fighters the stark difference between someone who dedicates their life to boxing and someone who merely cleans up after real champions?" Jessica felt that familiar sensation stirring in her chest, like a dormant predator awakening after years of forced hibernation. Her eyes briefly met Diana's, and for a split second, something passed between them that made the coach instinctively take a step backward. "Just an educational demonstration," Diana insisted, now attempting to mask the sudden uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Nothing too serious. Simply to illustrate to the beginners why respecting boxing is crucial." Jessica placed her mop bucket on the floor and rose slowly. Her movements possessed a fluid grace that seemed unusual for someone who had supposedly never stepped into a boxing ring. Around the gym, fighters ceased their individual practice, sensing that something significant was developing. "All right," Jessica said finally, her voice calm like the surface of still water before a tempest. "But when we finish, you're going to apologize to all of them for transforming this ring into a carnival sideshow." Diana laughed, but this time the sound carried a forced quality. "Apologize? Lady, you're going to be the one apologizing to the canvas when you become intimately acquainted with it." What none of those present could know was that Jessica Washington had once been Jessica Lightning Washington, 5-time world boxing champion. She had retired at the absolute peak of her career following a tragic accident that claimed the life of her closest friend and sparring partner. Since that devastating day, she had sworn never to fight again. But some promises are destined to be broken when human dignity hangs in the balance. If you're enjoying this tale of overcoming adversity and achieving justice, the narrator would say, you're about to discover how a simple moment of prejudice would transform into the most humiliating lesson of Coach Diana Thompson's life. Diana adjusted her championship belt with an exaggerated gesture, clearly savoring every moment of attention. Everyone gather around the ring closely. You're about to witness a practical demonstration of why hierarchy exists in the boxing world. Jessica observed as the 10 fighters formed a circle around the boxing ring. Some appeared eager for the demonstration, others visibly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding before their eyes. A young Latina woman with her hair braided back called out, "Coach Diana, maybe we could continue our regular training session. It's getting quite late." "And Rosa Martinez, are you questioning my coaching methods?" Diana cut her off sharply. "Sit down and observe. You'll learn more in the next 5 minutes than in a month of conventional training." Diana continued her theatrical display, gesturing dramatically toward Jessica. Here we have a perfect example of someone who never understood that there are appropriate places for certain types of people. Elite boxing gyms are not for Well, you understand. Jessica felt that familiar burning sensation in her chest, identical to what she had experienced 18 years ago when she heard similar degrading comments about fighters who didn't fit the conventional champion image. The difference was that now, at 42, she had learned to transform anger into fuel for something far more powerful than mere physical strikes. Jessica noticed how Diana used Rose's complete name, a clear demonstration of established authority. She also recognized the expression of fear in Rose's eyes, the same expression she had seen in her own mirror 2 decades ago when she would wake in cold sweats, remembering the accident that took the life of Maria Thunder Rodriguez, her dearest friend and sparring partner. Maria had died because of her. It was that brutally simple. A devastating uppercut that Jessica had thrown with excessive force during a heated sparring session. Maria fell backward, struck her head on the ring post in a catastrophic way, and never regained consciousness.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We are just a small channel trying to grow. And do not forget to comment where you're watching from. Thank you, and back to our video.
The official investigation concluded it was accidental, but Jessica knew the painful truth. She had lost complete control because of mounting pressure and racist comments from spectators that night. So, cleaning lady, Diana sneered, how about demonstrating basic defensive positioning for my fighters? Or is that too complicated for someone who only knows how to push a mop around? Laughter echoed throughout the gym, but Jessica remained perfectly motionless. Her eyes closed briefly, and for a moment, she was transported back to that ring in Las Vegas, hearing identical degrading comments that preceded the tragedy that forever changed her life. What's wrong? Are you scared? Diana insisted, now circling Jessica like a predator stalking wounded prey. Or are you just going to stand there like a statue? The same way you stand with that mop all day? That was when Diana made her first critical mistake. She pushed Jessica lightly on the shoulder, a seemingly harmless contact, but one that carried all the arrogance of someone who had never faced genuine consequences for her actions. Jessica absorbed the push without moving even an inch. Her feet remained planted on the ground like ancient tree roots, and Diana felt as though she had attempted to push against a concrete barrier. The coach's arrogant smile faltered momentarily. Interesting, Jessica muttered, more to herself than to Diana. It's been quite some time since someone tried to provoke me in that manner. There was something in Jessica's voice that completely changed the atmosphere. It wasn't a threat or anger. It was the terrifying calm of someone who had walked through much darker valleys and emerged fundamentally transformed. Diana, unable to interpret these danger signals, doubled down on her aggression. Did you hear that, everyone? She thinks it's interesting. How about we demonstrate the difference between thinking and actually knowing? What Diana failed to realize was that every humiliating word and gesture was awakening something within Jessica that had remained dormant for nearly 2 decades. Not anger or a thirst for revenge, but something far more dangerous. The crystal-clear memory of who she truly was when she stopped hiding. Rosa Martinez watched the unfolding scene with growing discomfort. There was something about the way the janitor breathed, the way her muscles tensed almost imperceptibly, that reminded her of nature documentaries about apex predators. The eerie calm before the strike. Last opportunity, lady, Diana announced, now clearly irritated by Jessica's lack of response. Either you step into this ring like an adult, or I call security to escort you out. And guess what happens then? You lose your employment too. Jessica opened her eyes slowly. When her gaze met Diana's, the coach felt an ice-cold chill race down her spine, as if she had just awakened a sleeping lion she had mistaken for a harmless house cat. All right, Jessica said finally, her voice low but laden with an authority that made everyone present fall into immediate silence. But when we finish, I want you to explain to your fighters why you transformed a place of learning into a circus of humiliation. Diana laughed, but this time the sound emerged nervous and strained. Explain? Lady, you're going to have extensive explaining to do when you're flat on the canvas. What neither of them knew was that Jessica had spent the last 18 years not only running from her past, but perfecting an emotional control that had transformed her former destructive power into something much more refined and devastatingly effective. They climbed into the ring, and Diana assumed her favorite boxing stance, feet positioned shoulder-width apart, gloves raised at face level, weight slightly forward. It was the classic posture of someone who had learned boxing in controlled environments against predictable opponents. Jessica stood motionless for several seconds, simply observing. Her eyes scanned Diana from head to toe, automatically cataloging every technical weakness. The elevated guard that left her body completely exposed. The unstable foundation that compromised her balance. The excessive tension in her shoulders that telegraphed every movement before execution. Still waiting, Diana sneered, bouncing slightly on her feet. Or are you just going to stand there like a mannequin? That's when Jessica did something completely unexpected. She began to move. It wasn't dramatic, just a subtle repositioning of her feet, a slight lowering of her center of gravity, her shoulders relaxing into perfect horizontal alignment. But to anyone who knew what to look for, the transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. Diana's first punch was technically flawless. A fast, precise jab executed exactly as she had practiced thousands of times. It was the type of strike that worked against 99% of people she had sparred with throughout her career. Jessica wasn't in that 99%. The movement was so rapid, so fluid, that half the observers couldn't process what had occurred. Jessica simply wasn't where Diana's fist had been aimed. Her body had flowed aside like water streaming around a boulder, and suddenly Diana was off balance. Her arm extended into empty air. "Nice attempt," Jessica commented softly. "Already repositioned and perfectly balanced. Clean technique, adequate speed, but you telegraphed the movement with your right shoulder." Diana spun wildly, trying to locate her opponent. How had someone moved so fast? Diana's second assault came in rapid succession. Jab, cross, hook. 3 strikes linked together with the precision of someone who had practiced the combination countless times. It was her favorite sequence, the one she used to finish sparring sessions and impress beginners. Again, Jessica simply wasn't there. This time, Rosa managed to follow the movement. Jessica had ducked low, allowing the jab to pass over her head by inches. The cross found only air when she leaned back in an impossible curve. And when Diana threw the hook with all her strength, Jessica took a small step back, causing the glove to pass millimeters from her chin. "Interesting combination," Jessica observed, still breathing evenly. "Works effectively against people who remain stationary, but you're leaving your left side completely vulnerable after the hook." After the sequence, Diana was starting to sweat heavily. This wasn't normal. She had landed thousands of punches in her life, and now she couldn't land a single one on a woman who had supposedly never fought before. "Stop dancing and fight," Diana shouted, launching an even more aggressive combination. That's when Jessica decided the demonstration had continued long enough. Diana's third attack, a desperate flurry of punches, found only air once again. But this time, something different happened. When Diana recovered after missing all her strikes, Jessica was inexplicably closer. "How?" Diana whispered, realizing she had completely lost control of the distance. "Coach Diana," Jessica said softly, now within arm's reach. "Do you want to know the difference between someone who learned to fight in gyms and someone who learned in professional rings?" Before Diana could answer, Jessica did something that defied everything those present thought they knew about physics. Without appearing to use any force, without any sudden or aggressive movements, she simply touched Diana on the chest with her right glove. Diana flew. She wasn't pushed or knocked down. She was literally propelled backward as if struck by an invisible wave. Her feet left the ground. She traveled nearly 2 meters through the air and landed on her back with an impact that made everyone gasp. The silence that followed was absolute. "That's impossible," Diana muttered, attempting to stand. Rosa Martinez answered before Diana could say more, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't understand who she is, do you?" Everyone turned to Rosa, who was holding her phone displaying search results. "Jessica Washington," Rosa read aloud, "also known as Lightning Washington, 5-time world boxing champion. considered one of the most technical fighters in history, retired undefeated after an 18-year career following an accident that resulted in her sparring partner's death. The impact hit the gym like a bomb. Diana felt her face drain of color as reality crashed down. She had challenged a living boxing legend. I retired at 29, Jessica nodded silently. Since then, I've worked whatever jobs I could find. Cleaning, maintenance, simple work, simple life. No spotlight, no cameras. No need to prove anything to anyone. The transformation in Diana was instantaneous and painful to watch. The arrogant woman was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the magnitude of her ignorance. I didn't know, Diana whispered. If you had known, would you have treated me with respect? Jessica interrupted gently. But would you still have humiliated some other janitor? Another worker who had no credentials to defend herself. The question cut deeper than any physical blow. Diana realized that Jessica had put her finger on the root of her real problem. Not ignorance about her credentials, but the fundamental arrogance that made her believe she could humiliate people based on their professions. I sincerely apologize, Diana said finally, her voice filled with unprecedented humility. To you, to Rosa, to everyone here. I have no excuse for my behavior. Jessica nodded, accepting the apology with the same grace she had demonstrated in the physical confrontation. Apologies are only the beginning, Diana. The question is, what will you do differently moving forward? 3 months later, the gym had been completely transformed. Jessica Washington was no longer just the janitor. Rosa Martinez had convinced the gym owner to hire her as a trainer specializing in advanced techniques and boxing philosophy. Diana Thompson lost half of her fighters within the first week. The video Rosa had discreetly recorded spread across social media, showing a boxing coach being humbled by a mere janitor. Coach Jessica, Rosa said after a class on respect and humility, thank you for teaching me that true strength doesn't require display to be recognized. Jessica smiled while organizing equipment. The most important lesson is simple. Never judge someone by their profession or appearance. Everyone carries stories that can surprise us. Sometimes justice arrives quietly, like lightning that transforms everything without warning. Jessica proved that genuine victory isn't destroying your opponent, but demonstrating that greatness emanates from character, not credentials. If you enjoyed the story, hit the subscribe button for more inspiring stories and don't forget to like and share.